In this video, we're going to basically create the animation for running, and we're going to create the behavior tree to transition between run and idle and discuss the logic that we need to create. So to get started, the first thing that we need to do here is select our running animation here for our player. So we have here this warrior run, and this is what we're going to use. So we're going to be transitioning to this. All right, so we need to do the same process and animate this. So we're going to select our sprite. With the sprite selected, we're going to go into the animation view. We're going to drop down the idle animation, and we're going to create a new clip. The clip that we're going to create is going to be called run for the player. Go into your sprites, go into your characters, your player, animations, and save. This will create a run animation. From there, you'll see here automatically in the animator component that's attached to our player, it's going to create this run animation. We'll get into creating a transition in just a moment. We need to now hit the record mode on the animator component or in the animator window. And now we need to select all of the run sprites and drag them in. So Warrior Run 0 all the way to Warrior 121. Select and drag, and you can see here you can stop recording, and in the scene view, hit play, and you'll see that's our run animation. So right now it's a little chaotic. So one of the things that we're going to transition it to is go ahead and create a 30 frame per second animation. Change the samples from 60 to 30. And you'll see here, much smoother. One thing I see here is that our sprite is shifting. And the reason for that is because although the automatic slicer gave us each individual sprite, it did not splice them proportionately or equally. So some sprites, if we actually look at the warrior run here, you can see here that some of the alpha is larger than some of the others, and that's causing it to shift. So to fix this, what we need to do is we actually just need to rerun the splicer. We're going to go to sprite editor and slice. Instead of going type automatic, let's do grid by cell size. And I believe the grid by cell size is 256 by 256. You'll get this information from an artist in the future if you have one that you're working with. By doing that, you can see here that now we have equal sprites and everything is now centered. If I hit apply, that should now fix the animation. And you'll see here that if we run this, we may have to recreate this animation. Let's go ahead and click in our animation view. I believe we will need to recreate this animation, so let's go ahead and select the run and delete it from here, and we'll delete it from here as well. Once we've done that, we can then select our sprite, drop down the idle, create a new clip, and we'll call this run. Let's go ahead, hop back into our warrior run, add sprites 0 through 21, and drag it in here. Make it 30 frames per second, hop into your scene view, and let's see how it looks. And as you can see, it's now much, much better, very consistent. Now, I noticed this also on the idle sprite. So you'll see here that the idle is sort of shifting around. Let's go ahead and update the idle sprite as well. So go to idle, go to sprite editor, and let's slice this 256 by 256. And that's going to give us equal proportions as well. Hit apply. It's going to make those changes to each individual sprite. And from there, we can hit play, and that looks way better. So we didn't have to create the new animation. But as you can see here, the idle is solid, he's moving his sword, and it's much cleaner. So we created our animations. What we need to do now is create the logic for the transition. So if we look here, we have our idle and run. When should we transition to run? If we go into our animator view, and to get here, if you select your sprite, you can double click this controller, make sure it's active. You can double click this controller, and right now what's going to happen is as soon as the game runs, we have an entry point. It's going to go straight to idle, and it's going to loop on idle. But when should we go to run? We should go to run when we are hitting the right arrow key or the left arrow key or A and D, which is our horizontal input, right? So what we're going to have here is we're going to have a parameter that's of type float that's going to be mapped to our horizontal inputs. So here we're going to say move, And if move is greater than 0, that means we're moving to the right. If it's less than 0, we're moving to the left. If it's 0, if it equals 0, that means we are back in idle. So if you right click, you can create this transition. Right click idle, make transition, you'll get this white line. When do we go to run? If you select the white transition, it's going to bring up this panel here. And what we can do is we can create if-then logic inside of these conditions. So here, we're going to transition from idle to run if move is greater than 0. And that's correct. If it's greater than 0, we're going to transition to run. So we'll go ahead and keep that. Now, when should we move back to idle? Well, there is no equal for this. So you can see here that move is less than. Ideally, we want to move back to idle if move is 0, right? Well, there's no equal sign here. There's nothing to compare. We can only use greater than or less than. So what we need to do is through code, we're going to use something called an absolute value. And the absolute value is going to basically return a -1 as a positive 1, a 1 as a positive 1, and a 0 as a 0. So what we can do here is we can say if move is less than 0.1. That way, if it's greater than 0, we're in the run state. And if it's less than 0.1, which it will be because as soon as you stop hitting the WSAD keys, it's going to be instantly 0, which is less than 0.1. It will then transition back to idle. And you can actually view in the preview these transitions. So we're going to be running to idle. And then here, we're going to be idle to running. So now how do we make this work? So we set up the transitions and we set up the player logic. What we need to do now is create code to access the animator component and play the animation based on when we're running. So we're going to cover that in the next video. For now, what I would like to do here is if we select our run animation and our player animation, there's one more thing we want to make sure we do. The run animation, you want to make sure that loop time is checked. We do want to loop these animations when they're occurring, and same for idle. From here, if we run our game, we're just going to be in idle. And you can see here that our player is going to be in idle. And if I were to increase this to say 1, we are now running. And if I make this 0 again, now we're in idle. So we're going to create that transition dynamically through code. I'll see you guys in the next video.